thoughts on nutrition, and then in brackets, micros from whole foods for strength and hypertrophy versus macros met by adding multivitamins. In terms of sports performance and in terms of actual outcomes in large scale sport, the macros and the calorie intake is the most important thing. And I think pretty much everyone will agree with you. In terms of eating cleanly, in terms of how you will feel, in terms of your overall energy levels, eating more clean from whole foods, you will definitely feel a lot better. I have to say this, when you see people on social media with very good numbers, with incredible sporting achievements, like Clarence in this case, you are looking at the genetic elite of people that you have probably never met in your entire life. Me and Owen have met more professional high-level athletes than almost anyone you've ever met, almost anyone you could ever imagine. And Clarence is still up there with one of the freakiest freaks you could ever come across. Never, ever mistake what genetic freakedness and talent will do for someone versus nutrition, versus training programming, versus anything along those lines. You cannot understand how outside of the norm some genetic talent can be. And so in that case, I would certainly not look at them and say, that's how I'll get my best results. In my opinion, what you should be looking at is look at the bog standard athlete, the bog standard genetic mush that most of us are, and say, how do they get the best results? And most people get the most results from monitoring their macros and eating as closely to an ideal macro split as you can possibly get. If you want to lose weight, being in a calorie deficit, keep your protein slightly higher, keep your carbs slightly lower, and moderate fats. And I would say in those cases, don't hear hooves and think zebras. You're going to hear hooves and think horses.
So one of the things is definitely that in the short run, you're probably going to see not a major difference in the outcome over maybe a 12-week training block if you're just controlling for macros as opposed to food choices. Now, in some cases, the more metabolically healthy you are, just the leaner you are and the better shape you are, you'll tolerate those poor food choices better and have a better time transferring that to performance. So if you're someone who is just very fit, lean, lots of muscle mass, well used to training, you'll see those people, once you get sufficient macros, sufficient amount of protein, carbs, and fats to maintain normal metabolic health, you'll see that they will perform quite well. What we're always wondering about here is the fact that over the long term, how would the quality of nutrition affect your performance in terms of health? And then how would that health affect your ability to keep performing? And if you're really, really off, then there's probably going to be some issues there. But the thing is, I just can't really think of anyone who eats like absolute crap. It's almost, if you're controlling for macros and training, it's almost impossible. You would have to try and eat like shit to actually have really bad macros. That's the reason the macros are obviously macros, is because the quantities of them are quite small in the grand scheme of things. So if you're controlling for macros, for the most part, it's just going to start making sense where you look at 5 biscuits and you see 500 calories and you see 40 grams of fat, but you've got 50 grams of fat for the day. It just starts to kind of self-control itself. It's almost a no-brainer where you're like, right, I'll just have my porridge and I'll have my low-fat yogurt because it just won't fit any other way. So it's kind of self-fulfilling in the fact that controlling for macros usually forces you to, by and large, try and fit in better quality foods. The main thing here is, will a multivitamin cover everything? Is there other micronutrients that's not covered in that? Are they sufficient forms to actually give you a benefit? Then obviously people will make the argument that the quality of food isn't as good as it used to be in certain places, and where's the source of that food? So I would say macros will cover you, because if you're following macros and they're reasonable macros, it just quickly makes sense to fit better quality foods in there.